If you're planning to land at Liberia Airport and you're wondering whether a quick domestic flight is the smartest way to get to your destination in Costa Rica, stop for a second. For a family or group of 4 or more, that flight will almost never save you money. And on many routes, it may not save you as much time as you think. But there are situations where flying can absolutely be worth it. So, in this video, we're going to look at the real numbers and show you how to know when flying makes sense and when a private transfer is actually the better option. We'll look at the pros and cons of domestic flights in Costa Rica, how the math changes as your group gets bigger, and the situations where flying can actually save you a significant amount of time. Here's what almost no one explains. Domestic flights in Costa Rica are priced more by the route than by the actual distance flown. So, a flight that takes 20 minutes can cost surprisingly close to one that takes an hour. Private transportation works almost the opposite way. You pay one price for the vehicle, usually for up to 6 people, and that price increases mainly with the distance and the driving time. So, flights don't get cheaper on longer routes. Instead, driving gets expensive enough that eventually the flight starts to look attractive. And this is where group size really changes the math. A flight is priced per seat. 1 or 2 people can make that airfare look pretty reasonable. But with 5 or 6 people, you're paying that fare for every single passenger on every leg. Now, let's look at the fare itself. You may see a headline price around $109 and think, that's not bad. But that's not necessarily the fare most families will actually pay. That price is typically for the basic fare with only a small amount of hand baggage and no checked bag. Once you add a checked bag and taxes, you're looking at something closer to $170 per person, and children over 2 generally pay essentially the same fare as adults because you're paying for the seat, not the age of the passenger. So, for a family of 4, you're already looking at roughly $680 one way before adding transportation to and from the airports. That's where the math starts to change. Let's put some real routes on this. Take Liberia to San Jose. The flight itself is only around 50 minutes, so on paper it sounds fantastic. But compare that with the private driver. You're looking at roughly 5.5 hours of driving and around $480 for the entire vehicle for up to 6 people. 4 people flying with bags could cost around $680 one way. So yes, the flight costs more, but you save several hours. And if you're traveling with 6 people, the private transfer is still around $480, while the airfare climbs to roughly $1,000 because you're paying for 6 seats. So, the bigger your group gets, the more attractive that flat rate for private transfers becomes. But there is another thing you need to remember. The flight doesn't take you from Liberia Airport to your hotel in San Jose. You still need transportation from the airport to your final destination. The private transfer, on the other hand, is door to door. So, the real comparison isn't simply 50 minutes flight versus 5.5 hours drive. It's total door to door time versus total door to door time. Now, let's look at the route where flying becomes much more compelling, San Jose to Puerto Jiménez, down in the Osa Peninsula. The flight is still roughly 50 minutes, but driving can take 7 to 8 hours, and a private driver can cost around $600. Now, you're giving up a little more money for the flight, but you're buying back much bigger part of your day. And that's the point. Flying starts to make more sense when the drive is long enough to cost you an entire day. But there are 2 things families often forget. First, the airstrip isn't your hotel. You still need transportation from the airport to your accommodation, and you're doing that on both ends of the trip. So, flying doesn't eliminate ground transportation. It adds 2 shorter ground transfers. Second, small domestic flights come with their own friction. You generally need to be at the airport about an hour before departure, and during the green season, weather can cause delays or cancellations. That's not necessarily a reason not to fly. We actually love flying around Costa Rica, but if you're traveling with kids, especially when you have another flight or important connection later that day, you need to leave enough buffer. And there is one more important piece. San Jose is the main hub for domestic flights. Liberia Airport is smaller and it doesn't connect directly to every destination. So, depending on where you're going, a flight from Liberia may not even be an option. And sometimes getting where you want to go means routing through San Jose first. At that point, you're adding time and complexity to a trip that was supposed to save you time. After pricing these options for families over and over again, the pattern is pretty consistent. Flight prices stay relatively flat. Ground transportation gets more expensive as the drive gets longer, and airfare multiplies with every additional passenger, while a private transfer is usually one price for the whole vehicle. So, here's a rule of thumb. The bigger your group, the longer the drive needs to be before flying starts making financial sense. For shorter and medium length drives, groups of 4 or more people usually get better value from a private transfer. But when the drive becomes long enough to take up most of the day, flying becomes much more attractive because you're buying back valuable vacation time. For solo travelers and couples, flying can become attractive much more sooner. Even a family with a toddler can sometimes benefit, especially on routes involving very long drives. And if time is more important to you than budget, that's a different story. Domestic flights can be an excellent way to move around Costa Rica. In less than an hour, you can reach destinations that would otherwise take most of the day by road. So, we're not against domestic flights at all. We love them. The point is simply to understand what you're actually buying. You're paying more to buy back time. So, before you book that flight, get the real driving time first. Look at the entire door-to-door journey, compare the total cost for your entire group, and make sure you're not adding unnecessary backtracking to your itinerary. That's why we built our free drive time reality map. It shows you the realistic driving times from Liberia to the major destinations around Costa Rica, so you can quickly see which routes might be worth flying and which ones are better by road. You can grab it by clicking the link in the comments and descriptions below. And once you know whether you're flying or driving, the next questions many families ask is, do you really need a 4x4 in Costa Rica? And the honest answer depends a lot more on where you're going than you might think. So, watch the next video where we break down exactly when you need a 4x4 in Guanacaste and when you absolutely don't. See you next time.